Have you ever fantasized about the perfect revenge moment? The kind where you don't just get even, you rise so far above your enemies that they're forced to look up at you? I lived that fantasy. My name is Amara Blackwood, and this is my story of sweet, calculated revenge. Imagine being humiliated by your father in front of everyone who matters to you, only to return years later as his daughter's fiancé's boss. That's exactly what happened to me. Before I dive into how I engineered the most satisfying comeback of my life, take a second to subscribe to Nexus of Revenge and hit that notification bell. Trust me, you'll want to know when more stories of justice served cold like mine drop each day. 5 years ago, I left my hometown of Westridge with nothing but my dignity and determination. Now I was returning in a black sedan, wearing Prada sunglasses and an Armani suit that cost more than what most people make in a month. As the CEO of Phoenix Innovations, a company valued at over $2 billion with thousands of employees across Asia, I had transformed from the disgraced daughter into a force to be reckoned with. My driver, Marcus, caught my eye in the rearview mirror as we pulled up to the sprawling Mediterranean mansion overlooking the Pacific. "Are you sure about this, Ms. Blackwood?" I smoothed down my blazer, feeling the weight of the newspaper clipping in my pocket. The evidence that would vindicate me after all these years. "I wasn't invited back," I said coolly, "but some obligations can't be ignored. My father had publicly disowned me at my mother's 50th birthday party, called me a traitor in front of family, friends, and business associates, told me I was dead to him. Now I was crashing her 55th celebration, uninvited by him, but with a secret that would shatter his world and force him to recognize that I had been right all along. If you've ever been underestimated by family or cut down by someone who should have supported you, hit that subscribe button now. My journey from disowned daughter to billionaire CEO is just the beginning of what we share on Nexus of Revenge, because nothing feels better than proving wrong the people who should have believed in you from the start. Let me take you back to where it all began, when I was still my father's golden child. For 27 years, I was the golden child of the Blackwood family. Harvard MBA, summa cum laude. The heir apparent to Blackwood Enterprises, my father's multi-million-dollar real estate development company. I worked alongside him for 5 years after graduation, learning every aspect of the business. I earned respect not because of my last name, but because of my intelligence and work ethic. At least that's what I thought. "You have your father's eye for detail," they'd say. "Richard Blackwood's daughter through and through." I wore that comparison like a badge of honor. My father had built Blackwood Enterprises from nothing, and I was proud to follow in his footsteps. Until I discovered the Jade Valley project. It was supposed to be our flagship development in China, a luxury eco-resort and residential community outside Shanghai. On paper, it looked perfect, but during a routine audit, I found discrepancies. The project specifications had been altered, safety measures stripped away, environmental protections ignored, all to cut costs, $20 million worth of corners. I remember the knot in my stomach as I walked into my father's office, documentation in hand. "Dad, we have a problem with Jade Valley," I said, spreading the papers across his mahogany desk. He barely glanced up from his computer. "What problem?" "The specs have been changed. The earthquake reinforcements, the environmental safeguards, they're gone. If there's a natural disaster, these buildings could collapse. People could die." That's when my father finally looked at me, his steel-grey eyes narrowing. "It's business, Amara. This is how it's done internationally." By bribing officials? By putting lives at risk? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The Chinese inspectors have already been taken care of. No one will notice the changes. His tone was dismissive, as if we were discussing the color of carpet, not potential manslaughter. "This isn't a discussion," he continued when he saw my expression. "If you can't handle how business is done in the real world, maybe you're not cut out for this after all." For 3 sleepless nights, I wrestled with my conscience. Was this how my father had always operated? Had I been blind to it? Or was this new territory a line he'd never crossed before? On the fourth night, I made my decision. I compiled a dossier of evidence, altered blueprints, doctored environmental impact statements, records of suspicious payments, and sent copies to regulatory authorities in both the US and China. The next evening was my mother's 50th birthday party. 200 guests filled our backyard. I was mingling, champagne in hand, when my father received a call. The Jade Valley project had been suspended pending investigation. I'll never forget the look on his face when he found me. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal. He knew it was me. "You did this," he hissed, gripping my arm so tightly it left bruises. "You betrayed your own family." I was protecting our family, I countered, trying to keep my voice steady despite the scene he was creating. "What you're doing is illegal and it's wrong." He laughed, a cold, hollow sound that silenced the entire party. "You naive little girl. You think you understand how the world works. You've just cost this company hundreds of millions of dollars." "I've saved lives," I insisted. "And our reputation." My father's voice dropped to a deadly whisper, but in the silence, everyone heard him. "You're fired. You're no daughter of mine. You're dead to this family. Get out of my house, and don't ever come back." My mother tried to intervene, but he silenced her with a look. My sister Zoe watched in horrified silence, tears streaming down her face. And I, head held high despite my own tears, walked out of that party, out of that house, and out of Westridge with nothing but my purse and the clothes on my back. Have you ever stood up for what's right only to be punished for it? Comment below with your experiences of being the bad guy for doing the right thing. Trust me, I know exactly how that feels. By the time I reached my hotel room that night, my company credit cards had already been declined. By morning, my personal accounts, many joint with my father, were frozen. Within 48 hours, my father had begun his campaign to destroy my reputation in American business circles. According to him, I had stolen company secrets, tried to sabotage Blackwood Enterprises out of jealousy, maybe even colluded with competitors. I was 27 years old, essentially penniless, jobless, and homeless. The golden child had fallen. Hard. 3 days into my exile, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize with an international code. "Amara? It's Wei Huang." Wei had been our lead engineer on the Jade Valley project, brilliant MIT graduate who had quietly supported my concerns about the safety violations. "I've left Blackwood Enterprises," he told me, "and I'm not the only one. Your father is purging anyone he suspects of being loyal to you." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed. I couldn't afford another night in. "Wei, I'm sorry. I never meant for anyone else to get caught in the crossfire." "Don't apologize," he said firmly. "We believe in what you did, and I have a proposition for you." Wei had connections with a venture capital firm in Hong Kong that was looking to invest in innovative construction technology. He arranged a meeting. Within weeks, I was on a plane to Asia with nothing but a carry-on bag and a PowerPoint presentation. Using my knowledge of sustainable building practices, an interest my father had always dismissed as trendy nonsense, I pitched a company that would develop cutting-edge, eco-friendly construction materials and techniques. With Wei as CTO and 3 other former Blackwood employees forming the core team, Phoenix Innovations was born. The symbolism wasn't subtle, rising from the ashes of my former life, but subtlety wasn't what I was going for. Those first years were brutal. I lived in a tiny apartment in Hong Kong that made my college dorm look spacious. I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week. I poured every cent of investor money back into the company. Meanwhile, my father's influence ensured no American developer would touch us. But in Asia, where sustainable development was becoming a priority, we found a receptive market. Our first breakthrough came with something I'm still proud of today: a revolutionary concrete mixture that reduced carbon emissions by 60% while improving earthquake resistance. It was a direct response to the safety issues I had identified in the Jade Valley project. By our third year, Phoenix had secured contracts for major projects in Singapore, Japan, and South Korea. By year 4, we had expanded into green energy solutions for large-scale developments. We were growing exponentially, hiring hundreds, then thousands of employees. And now, 5 years after walking out of my parents' house with nothing, I stood at the helm of a company valued at over $2 billion. The girl my father had disowned now controlled more resources than he did. The naive idealist he had mocked had proven that ethical business could also be profitable business. Every morning when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who had been tested and not found wanting. Someone who had stayed true to her principles even when it cost her everything. And ultimately, someone who had built something remarkable from nothing. When someone cuts you out of their life, you have 2 choices. Fight to get back in, or build something so impressive they regret ever letting you go. I chose the second path. Like this video if you believe the best revenge is massive success, I certainly do. Now, let me tell you about the day I finally returned to Westridge. 5 years, 1,825 days of building my empire far from home. I hadn't planned on returning to Westridge. Not yet. But then my phone pinged with a text from my sister Zoe. Mom's 55th birthday. Saturday, 7 p.m. She misses you. Please come. 10 minutes later, another message. Dad doesn't know I invited you. Come anyway. I stared at those words for hours. My mother and I had maintained a cautious relationship over the years. Occasional calls when my father was away on business. Zoe and I texted regularly, met secretly during my rare visits to the States. But I had never set foot in Westridge since that night. Was I ready? More importantly, was it worth it? The answer came to me as I was reviewing the quarterly reports. Revenue up 37% year over year. 28 new contracts signed. Our revolutionary building materials now being used in 17 countries. Yes, I was ready. And yes, it would be worth it. I didn't respond to Zoe's text. Instead, I called my assistant and arranged for the company jet. Some entrances deserve an element of surprise. As my black sedan glided to a stop in front of the sprawling Mediterranean-style mansion, I could hear the party in full swing. 100 or so of Westridge's elite, mingling on the expansive lawn. My mother, Diana Blackwood, standing near the fountain in a blue cocktail dress, accepting birthday wishes. And my father, Richard Blackwood, glass of scotch in hand, holding court with a group of businessmen, exactly as I had left them. Exactly as I had imagined this moment. I told Marcus to wait, adjusted my Prada sunglasses, and walked up the cobblestone driveway, fashionably late to ensure everyone would be present for my entrance. I stepped through the French doors onto the terrace, and it happened exactly as I'd pictured it. Conversations faltered, heads turned. A waiter nearly dropped his tray of champagne flutes. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, tears instantly welling in her eyes. But it was the expression on my father's face that I had come to see. The shock, the anger, and beneath it all, a flicker of fear. "Amara," my mother broke the silence, rushing toward me. "You came. I can't believe you're here." I embraced her, breathing in her familiar perfume. "Happy birthday, Mum." Zoe appeared at my side, looking radiant in a green dress. "You actually came," she whispered, squeezing my hand. "I'm so glad." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. I had missed the last 5 birthdays, after all. A tall man with sandy hair approached us. "You must be the famous Amara," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Nate Wilson, Zoe's fiancé." I smiled, shaking his hand. "It's nice to meet you, Nate. Zoe's told me a lot about you." Before Nate could respond, my father's voice cut through the awkward murmurs of the crowd. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, striding toward us. "You weren't invited." "I invited her," Zoe said, stepping slightly in front of me. "It's Mum's birthday, and she wanted all her family here." My father's jaw clenched. This is my house, and I decide who's welcome here. Richard, please, my mother began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. No. She made her choice 5 years ago. She chose to betray this family, to nearly destroy everything I built. I met his gaze steadily, acutely aware of the audience we had. Perfect. I stopped you from making a terrible mistake, one that could have cost lives and ruined our family name forever. You cost us hundreds of millions of dollars, he snapped. The Jade Valley project was supposed to be our entry into the Chinese market. After you sabotaged it, we were blacklisted there for years. For good reason, I replied calmly, reaching into my clutch and pulling out a folded newspaper clipping. I handed it to my mother, whose hands trembled as she unfolded it. It's an article from the Asian Financial Times dated just 2 months ago, I explained to the stunned crowd. The headline reads, "Former Blackwood executive, Zhang arrested for embezzlement." I turned back to my father, whose face had drained of colour. Li Zhang, your partner on the Jade Valley project, was skimming millions from the construction budget and cutting corners on safety to cover it up. He was arrested 2 months ago and has implicated several others. My voice carried across the now silent gathering. It wasn't me who nearly destroyed Blackwood Enterprises, Dad. It was your partner. I saved our family from being associated with a criminal enterprise. This confrontation is just heating up, and what happens next will change everything for the Blackwood family. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss the moment when the tables turn in our revenge stories. Trust me, what happens next is worth waiting for. An uncomfortable silence fell over the party. Guests shifted awkwardly, torn between the drama unfolding before them and the social grace of pretending not to notice. I could feel their eyes on us, watching this family saga like a real-time soap opera. My father stood there, processing the revelation about Zhang, clearly caught off guard but trying to maintain his composure. And then, something unexpected happened. Something I couldn't have planned better myself. Nate Wilson, my sister's fiancé, was staring at me with growing recognition in his eyes. His expression shifted from polite interest to utter astonishment. "Wait a minute," he said, studying me more closely. "Amara Blackwood? As in, the CEO of Phoenix Innovations?" I nodded, surprised that he knew of my company. "You've heard of us?" What happened next would become legend in Westridge's social circles for years to come. Nate Wilson, architectural wunderkind, scion of one of Westridge's oldest families, and future son-in-law of Richard Blackwood, actually bowed slightly to me. "Welcome back, boss," he said, genuine respect in his voice. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. My mother's eyes widened. Zoe looked between her fiancé and me in confusion. And my father? His face turned an alarming shade of red. "What did you just call her?" he demanded, his voice dangerously quiet. Nate, suddenly aware of the social landmine he'd stepped on, looked between my father and me uncomfortably. I'm sorry, but Phoenix Innovations acquired Wilson Architectural Group, my family's firm, last month. Technically, Ms. Blackwood is my new boss." My father scoffed, disbelief written across his face. "That's impossible. Wilson Architectural is worth at least $300 million. There's no way you could afford that acquisition." Nate cleared his throat awkwardly. "Actually, sir, the final valuation was closer to $500 million. And it was a cash deal." Another wave of whispers swept through the crowd. I watched the calculations happening behind my father's eyes, the sudden realization that his disowned daughter now commanded resources he had never imagined I could access. "Phoenix Innovations is currently valued at $2.3 billion, I said quietly, allowing myself a small smile. "We employ over 3,000 people across Asia and now, with Wilson Architectural, in North America as well." My mother's hand flew to her heart. Zoe's jaw literally dropped. And my father? The man who had thrown me out penniless 5 years ago? For perhaps the first time in his life, Richard Blackwood was speechless. Imagine the look on my father's face in that moment. The man who had disowned me and cast me out with nothing but the clothes on my back, now discovering I was worth billions and employed his future son-in-law. If that doesn't deserve a like on this video, I don't know what does. But the revelations weren't over yet. I had one more bombshell to drop, one that would force my father to acknowledge I had been right all along. My father recovered quickly, his business instincts kicking in. "Well," he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "it seems you've done well for yourself, Amara. Congratulations." But I hadn't come back just to show off my success. I turned to address the crowd directly. The Jade Valley project didn't just fail because of corruption. It failed because it was fundamentally flawed. The land was unsuitable for the type of development Blackwood Enterprises planned. I paused, making sure everyone was listening. And 3 years ago, that area experienced a 6.2 magnitude earthquake. Had those buildings been constructed as planned, hundreds of people would have died. A heavy silence fell over the gathering. Even my father had no response to that. "So yes, I cost the company a project," I continued. "But I saved lives. And I saved our family from being associated with what would have been a tragic disaster. I don't regret what I did. I only regret that it cost me my family." My mother moved to stand beside me, taking my hand firmly. I could see the tears in her eyes, but there was something else too, a resolve I'd rarely seen in Diana Blackwood. "Not anymore," she said, her voice carrying across the lawn. "You will always be welcome in this home, Amara. Always." She looked pointedly at my father. "Richard, it's time to admit you were wrong. Our daughter did the right thing, at great personal cost. And look what she's accomplished on her own, without any help from us. It's time to make amends." I watched my father's face as he processed what was happening. The man who had ruled our family with an iron will for decades was suddenly faced with something he couldn't control. The tide of public opinion had turned against him. More importantly, his wife, who had stood by him through 40 years of marriage, was prepared to take a stand. And perhaps, somewhere beneath his pride, he recognized the truth in my words. The Zhang arrest had clearly shaken him more than he'd admitted to anyone. "We should discuss this in private," he said finally, gesturing toward the house. "No, Dad," I replied firmly. "5 years ago, you humiliated me publicly. You disowned me in front of everyone we know. If there's going to be reconciliation, it starts here, now, in front of these same witnesses." A muscle twitched in his jaw. Pride had always been his weakness. But faced with the combined resolve of his wife and daughters, something in him seemed to yield. "You were right about Zhang," he admitted grudgingly. "After the project was suspended, he disappeared with a significant amount of company funds. We covered it up to avoid further scandal. It wasn't quite an apology, but from Richard Blackwood it was a seismic concession." "And the safety concerns?" I pressed, unwilling to let him off the hook. He sighed deeply. "I didn't look closely enough at the plans. I trusted Zhang to handle the details. That was an error in judgment." My mother squeezed his arm encouragingly. "Richard, please, just say it." He met my eyes, and for a moment I glimpsed something unfamiliar there. Respect, and perhaps a trace of regret. "You made the right call," he said finally, "and I reacted badly. I was wrong to cut you off." The words hung in the air, imperfect, but genuine. I felt a knot of emotion rising in my throat. 5 years of anger, hurt, and vindication culminated in this moment. "Thank you," I said simply. Zoe, who had been watching the exchange with growing hope, stepped forward to complete the family circle. "So does this mean we're all coming to my wedding?" she asked, with a tentative smile. My mother laughed, breaking the tension. "Of course we are, all of us. Together." My father nodded stiffly but didn't contradict her. "What would you do in my position? Would you accept this half apology from a father who publicly disowned you, or would you demand more? After 5 years of building my own empire, was this enough to heal the wound? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to see what you would do in this moment of truth. As the party gradually resumed around us, with guests pretending they hadn't just witnessed the most dramatic Blackwood family scene in years, I found myself drawn to the garden's edge. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, a view I had missed for 5 long years. I sensed my father's presence before I saw him. He stood beside me, looking out at the water rather than at me. "You've done well for yourself," he said finally, his voice gruff but genuine. "Better than I expected." "Thank you," I replied simply. "Phoenix Innovations," he mused. "Rising from the ashes. A bit on the nose, don't you think?" I couldn't help but smile. I thought it was appropriate. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of 5 years stretching between us. Not quite healed, but no longer bleeding. "Your mother wants you to come to dinner next week," he said. "Just family. To catch up." I turned to look at him directly. "And what do you want, Dad?" He met my gaze, and for a fleeting moment I saw a glimpse of the father I had once adored, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had beamed with pride at my Harvard graduation. "I want to hear about your company," he said. "This concrete mixture that reduces carbon emissions, and the solar integration system your Singapore project used. It sounds innovative. It wasn't 'I'm sorry' or 'I love you.' It wasn't the emotional reconciliation that Hollywood might have scripted. But it was genuine. And for the Blackwoods, it was a beginning." "I'd like that," I said softly. Looking back towards the house, I saw my mother and sister watching us from the terrace, hope written across their faces. Beyond them, party guests were leaving, carrying with them the tale of my triumphant return. 5 years ago, I had left this place in tears, my future uncertain. Tonight, I was leaving on my own terms, with my head held high and the promise of family dinners to come. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, standing firm in your truth, and leaving the door open for those who once closed it on you to find their way back. And sometimes, when you least expect it, they do. That's our story of sweet vindication. If you enjoyed watching Amara's father forced to acknowledge her success, hit subscribe right now. On Nexus of Revenge, we bring you the most satisfying karma stories where patience and perseverance lead to the perfect moment of justice. Comment below what you would have said to her father, and don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to see justice served cold. Until next time, remember, true power isn't about getting even, it's about rising above.